Good morning. Welcome to Member Focus Monday. I'm Cristina Schaefer, Director of Social Media for HAR, and I'm very excited to be joined this morning by Patrick Jankowski. He is the Senior VP of Research for the Greater Houston Partnership. Welcome back to our program, Patrick.
Christina, it's great to be on again. I always enjoy speaking to the realtors in town.
Absolutely, and they love to hear from you. But just in case we have any members who have not heard from you yet, if you don't mind, if you could tell us just a little bit about who you are and what you do for the partnership.
I'm the Senior Vice President of Research at the Greater Houston Partnership. I have a very long tenure with the organization. I have been there 39 years, believe it or not. I started out when it was the Houston Chamber of Commerce, when Louis Welch was head of the Chamber of Commerce. Over the years, I've done economic development work, I've done some policy work, I've done journalism at the organization. But for like the last 30 years, I've been pretty much an economist and studying what's going on in Houston. I lead a team of 5 other researchers, and we provide all the economic, demographic, and business analytics the organization needs to pursue its mission. And you want to know what the mission is, and it's kind of in a nutshell, it's to make Houston a better place.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I think our members are happy to hear that because, of course, they're helping people that are buying and selling homes in the Houston area, and we want to make this a great place to live. So, Patrick, we have a lot to talk about today. We do want to get your economic forecast and find out where Houston is headed and what to expect. But just to back up a little bit, the United States released the latest jobs report on Friday. What did you think about those numbers, and what do you think that tells us about recovery from the pandemic?
Well, the numbers were both disappointing and then not disappointing. That sounds like a cop out, but on one hand, the consensus was not everyone, but a lot of economists thought would produce about 550,000 jobs in November. The numbers only came in at 210,000, so it's less than half of what we expected. It turned out that retail suffered a little bit and hospitality suffered. And hospitality would be restaurants and bars and hotels. That's the tail end of not the tail end, but that's Delta impacting the economy. But that you need to put it in perspective, 210,000 jobs, the long-term average over the 10 years prior to COVID recession was 200,000. So pretty much what we did is we added jobs at the historic average rate. I'm not concerned about the economy slowing down, even with the rise of Omicron and Delta being here as well. We have learned how to live with the pandemic. It's not pleasant, but we know to wear masks. We know to social distance. We know to isolate when we're having symptoms, and we're getting vaccines. Now, if you look at the most vulnerable population, those 65 and over, 86% of the U.S. population 65 and over has gotten vaccinated. If you just look at the population as a whole, at least 70% of the population has gotten at least one shot. And we know that even getting one shot increases your immunity and lowers the chance of you having real serious complications. So yes, the jobs numbers were a little disappointing, but they're disappointing based on expectations, not based on history. And it's not something, as I think Biden had it right when he said, when we talked about Omicron, there should be something for concern, but not for panic. We'll get through this next stage of COVID just the way we've gotten through the last 4 or 5 stages of COVID.
Okay, very good. So let's talk a little bit about here locally. So I understand the partnership released its forecast last Wednesday, and we'd love to hear kind of some highlights from that and your update from that.
Sure. Christine, would you put the first slide on the screen, please?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's the partnership's forecast for 2022. That's the number of jobs created from December of this year to December of next year. 75,500. One of the things that you'll see when we show you a couple of the slides, we're going to see job creation across all sectors. And that's actually a pretty decent rate of job growth. Christine, show me the next slide, please. Mm-hmm. What you're looking at is job growth going back to 2000, to the beginning of the century. I guess you could say the beginning of the millennial. And so you can see that little yellow arrow to the far right. That shows you what the partnership's forecast is for 2022. And you can see just next to that where we are so far to date in 21. This has been a really good year for job growth coming out. And then you can see, working from right to left, you can see where we were in the pandemic. I guess it's kind of ironic that we're probably going to have in 2021 the best year on record for job growth, or pretty close to the best of the year. and that comes after the absolute worst year for job losses. But I'm showing you all that. You can see the peaks and the valleys. It kind of follows a wave. Uh, if you wanted to just take an average over the last 21 years and you take out the years in which oil prices had really sent job growth really high or oil prices pulled job growth down, we range between about 60, 65, 70,000 jobs a year, or 70,000 jobs a year. So the 75.5, that is actually a little bit better than the long-term average. And I wanted to try to, as I was running my models, it could have been just a little bit higher than that, but my concern is whether we're going to be able to find enough workers to fill all the open positions. That's really the biggest drag on job growth next year. It's not any fundamentals in the economy. It's the problem with not having enough workers.
There was just
So,
a quick question here, if you could clarify for us, Patrick. Stephen asked, so does that mean we're barely recovered from the loss?
oh gosh, no. Oh, Stephen, it's ironic because when I made this presentation to the partnership last Wednesday, I had 75 slides. Unfortunately, this sort of format doesn't allow us to have 75 slides, but I've got a slide there that shows a pie chart. And if you look at where we have recovered 75% of all the jobs we've lost in the pandemic for Houston. We've made really good progress on that. The challenge is there are four sectors which are holding us back, and that's construction, energy, manufacturing, and wholesale trade. That's too soon for that one,
Okay.
Christina. We'll get to that in a moment, okay?
Sure.
Let's go back. The problem with construction, energy, manufacturing, and wholesale trade, they started losing jobs prior to the pandemic. Construction started losing jobs in October 2019. Manufacturing started losing jobs in the summer of 19. So did wholesale trade. And energy started losing jobs in February 2019. For energy, it's been challenged. We think about low oil prices. It's not been the oil prices. It's been the fact that Wall Street has become disenchanted with the oil and gas industry. It doesn't want to loan any money to the oil and gas industry anymore. And so, even if oil prices go up, the energy firms cannot borrow to take advantage of those higher prices. And so, maybe you've heard the term out there, it's referred to as capital discipline. Wall Street has lent so much money and not seen the return it had hoped, and it said you must fund your operations out of cash flow. And so, that's one reason why the oil and gas industry started to struggle. The job losses started in February 2019. The struggles actually started in 18. And when you see energy start to struggle, 6 months later, you're going to see manufacturing struggle because about 40% of all the manufacturing jobs in Houston are tied to energy. And then wholesale trade feeds into energy as well. Construction, it's a matter of the overbuilt office market mainly. Also, we didn't have any really big infrastructure projects going on along the way. And the huge boom of construction projects we had along the ship channel in 15, 16, and 17 finally wound down. I say that so when I say the whole, if you take those four out, if you take out construction, if you take out energy, if you take out manufacturing, if you take out wholesale trade, and just look at the other 13 sectors that we track, we've recovered 93% of everything we lost in the pandemic.
Okay. So that was
So
good. He had a follow up. So only 75%, but it sounds like 93 is the
yeah, it
percentage.
sounds like 93. And the good thing though is we're starting to see, we just started in the last few months, started seeing some recovery in energy, construction, manufacturing, and wholesale trade. So rather than being a drag on the recovery, they're going to add a little bit of lift, not as much lift as other sectors. We'll add a little bit of lift. Now, maybe Christina, this is a good time to show that next slide,
Sure.
one of the big sectors. Okay, what you're looking at is the sectors which are going to add the most jobs next year in the Houston region. And I need to let you know, when I say Houston region, I'm talking about the metropolitan area. It's the 9 counties that compose what's referred to as the metropolitan statistical area. There's Austin, Brazoria, Chambers, Fort Bend, Galveston, Harris, Liberty, Montgomery, and Waller counties. And so you're going to see job growth in all these sectors. Now, administrative support seems like kind of an odd sector to be leading job growth. That one tends to track the economy and actually lead growth in the economy. When you're coming out of a downturn, the energy firm, when you come out of a downturn, employers, they often are reluctant to bring people on full time. They don't want to bring someone on full time, offering benefits until they know that the recovery has legs. And then when the recovery gets really strong, what they do is they bring people on as a contract worker. It could be a contract CPA, it could be a contract manufacturing worker, it could be a contract geologist, it could be a a contract administrative assistant. And when they feel like things are solid, then they'll go ahead and offer them full time pay and full time benefits.
Mm.
That's what we've seen in the last few months is a real surge in activity in administrative support. It also includes outsourcing stuff. Also, though, we're seeing a little bit of shift what's going on with contract workers, which comprise the biggest amount of that sector, is a lot of people, part of this great resignation, are choosing not to work full time and work in contract work. What we're actually doing is I've talked to some people out there, and they said that an architect specifically was telling me about how he had to lay off 7 people during the downturn. He tried to hire them back, and they said, no, we'll do contract work for you. And they only want to do as much work to pay their bills, and then they'll take a couple weeks off, and then when they need money again, they'll do more contract work. So it's part of that work-life balance and that shifting that we're seeing.
So
Overall,
Rosie, really quick, sorry, Patrick. Rosie
no
just had a
problem.
question that you kind of touched on here. She asked, why do you think workers are not returning to work specifically in the hospitality section?
Well, in hospitality, part of it is the demand isn't there yet.
Hmm.
If you look at where we are, we've only gotten about half of the hospitality, half the hotel jobs that we've lost. We nearly recovered everything in restaurants and bars, and we nearly recovered everything in retail. And that was the case in August. But when we had the surge in Delta, we started to see a drop off both in retail, restaurants, and bars as people became a little bit more cautious. And so I'm hoping that as things progress, either by December or by early next year, retail and restaurants will be back to normal.
Okay.
So it's we're doing fine. We're actually I'm quite pleased with where we are in the recovery to be this close to having everything recouped. And now that we're seeing growth in our major sector and our goods producing sectors,
Hmm.
I think we're doing just fine.
Wonderful. Did you want to talk about some of these
Yeah,
small
yeah.
small
Let's go back.
small?
No, let's go back to the other side just
Okay,
before that.
sure.
If you look at professional, scientific, and technical services, that's going to be legal, accounting, engineering, management, consulting, IT, basically white collar jobs that bodes well for office work. Healthcare and social assistance, I think that's fairly obvious. We aren't going to see, hopefully, not see any more mandates coming out of Austin saying you cannot perform elective surgeries. And that's what really hurt that sector early on. Restaurants and bars, we add on net. The restaurant business is notorious for being one that has a high failure rate. A lot of restaurants open and close, but still on net, we add roughly 300 new restaurants and bars a year in Houston. And when I say restaurants, it could be a Chick-fil-A or it could be a Tony's, but an eating place. And so that's benefiting from population growth. The government sector is mainly that's education. As we continue to grow and continue to have a very young population, we'll be adding teachers. Transportation and warehousing as we continue to work through the supply chain issue. So you can see manufacturing is going to benefit because we are going to start to see some increased drilling activities next year. And there have been a lot of rigs and a lot of equipment that's been sidelined. And during the worst part of the downturn, the energy companies, rather than ordering new pieces, new equipment, they just cannibalize the old equipment. So as the demand picks up, they can't bring those rigs back into the field. They're going to have to refurbish them or just scrap them all together and order new rigs. So we're going to see growth here in these major sectors. But let's go on to the next slide. So that shows you some of the sectors. They're not going to be adding as many jobs as the sectors on the first slide, but they will be adding jobs. We are going to see a slight pickup in construction. We're going to start to see some pickup in other services. And other services, that's where barbershops and beauty salons and nail salons and repair shops fall. Finance and insurance continues to remain strong. Educational services is private education. Retail trade, I'm not one who believes that retail has been dealt a death blow. Brick and mortar retail has been dealt a death blow by the pandemic. I think it may have accelerated some of the trends that we're seeing there, but there's always going to be a need for brick and mortar for two reasons. For one, as you guys know, we're building a lot of houses out in the suburbs. And there's an expression that retail follows rooftops.
Hmm.
And so you're going to need grocery stores and dry cleaners and things like that out in the suburbs. The other is, I've almost done with my Christmas shopping. Yeah, believe it or not, yeah, December 6th. But half of my presents I bought by going to the store because I wanted to look at them. And the other half I ordered online. There's still this sense or this need. I mean, sometimes it's just fun to get out and walk through a hard. I'm a guy. It's fun to get out and walk through Home Depot our lows and look at what's on the shelves. So I think brick and mortar will probably stabilize. We're not going to see a trend down to zero, but it just won't be as strong a growth as it has in the past. You could count on retail adding 7 or 8 thousand jobs. I think we're going to be in a period now where we're going to see it adding 2 to 3 thousand jobs. So let's go to the next slide, Christina.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what employment has looked like in Houston going back to 2010. It's kind of jagged because what I've done is showing you monthly growth, and that's something you need to understand is that we always lose jobs in January, and that's part of what happens at the year end when layoffs that did not take place before the holidays are finally implemented in January, and you have people who are hired for the Christmas holidays who are let go and so forth, and you always see a little dip in the summer for education. But the long-term trend, if you go from lower left-hand corner up to the right-hand corner, has always been up till you see that big dip right after 20. That's COVID. And then you can see us trending up. Now, if the partnership hits its numbers at 75,500, we will finish 2022 either right a few hundred jobs or 1,000 jobs below, roughly just barely below where we started prior to the pandemic, or just barely above. And we are probably on track to finish next year having recovered just about everything we've lost in the pandemic. If we haven't done it by December 2022, we'll do it very early in 2023. So now we're in a good spot. We really are. Excuse me, I need a sip of Earl Grey.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
and getting a little dry.
Absolutely, and thank you for sharing those highlights of the excuse me, of the forecast from last week. We truly appreciate it. A lot of comments, a lot of conversation going on in our comments here. If you do have questions for Patrick, please type them in. I have plenty more for you, Patrick. But
before you get off the forecast, I need to let everybody know that the forecast it's a formal document, and it's actually posted at the partnership's website. We've got the easiest web address in the world to remember. It's houston.org. And if you go there and you go business resources and publications, it should be the lead publication under business resources. And you can download a PDF of the document. You can get the details behind every sector in energy or manufacturing. And a lot of work goes into that. You may say, well, it's a long read, but I figure if you read it, you're going to have a solid understanding of what's happened in the economy and what will happen next year.
Thank you for that, Patrick. We had a question come in from Billy. He said, is Houston recovering faster than other major metropolitan areas?
Yes and no. Yeah, I know that's a cop-out, but it depends. If you look at us compared to metros on the East Coast and West Coast, like New York or Los Angeles or San Francisco or San Diego, we're ahead of them. If you look at us compared to some place like Austin or Phoenix or Salt Lake City or Tampa, we're behind them. And the reason why we're behind so many other is because of energy having weighed us down. I mean, we started losing jobs in February, and we were still losing jobs to the middle of this year in energy. Even as the rest of the economy opened up, energy was losing jobs. It was great. Energy was great for us in the first part of the decade, but it's been a problem for us the second part. If you take out energy, and manufacturing and construction, the big four, we're ahead of everybody. But you can't do that. I mean, they're part of our economy. Mm-hmm. Another way to say it is the sectors which were most impacted by COVID, the ones where you had to stay home, things were shut down, no one was going out, those are nearly fully recovered. What hasn't recovered is the sectors which had issues prior to COVID, the overbuilding and the lower oil prices and Wall Street souring on lending money to the oil and gas industry.
Okay. Thank you for that. So switching gears here, we wanted to talk a little bit about just inflation. What are your thoughts on the rising inflation rates, and how do you believe they'll impact our economic future?
Very interesting. If you've been following the Fed, Jerome Powell has done a pivot, an about face, chairman of the Fed. And he thought, and a lot of people, I'll admit I was in the same camp. I thought inflation was transitory. I thought it would resolve itself a lot quicker than it has. It looks like we're probably due for some inflation, at least for the next 6 to 12 months, maybe 18. I'm hoping it's more like 12. The problem is a lot of it has to do with two things. One is a shortage of workers. And so when they have a shortage of workers, the way to attract new workers or the way to keep workers is you pay higher salaries. and the higher salaries, part of that may be absorbed by the employer, but part of that's going to be passed along to the consumer.
Mm.
And then the consumer then is going to see higher prices, so they're going to demand higher wages. That's one issue. The other is the supply chain. I mean, God, it's so cliche. We talk about supply chain all the time. I mean, my 26-year-old daughter and I were talking about supply chain issues over Thanksgiving. Golly, I mean, and so that's one thing. We need to get the supply chain issues resolved. The thing is, inflation is just a little. Uh, it's you need to go to if you go to the partnership's website and you pull up the economy at a glance for October. There's a very detailed explanation about inflation.
Okay.
Part of the problem, inflation affects us differently. If you look at the there are about 15 or 16 different major components, and each of those have subcomponents. One of the factors which goes into inflation calculation, a third of inflation is housing costs. And we know home prices have gone up, and we know apartment rents have gone up. But the thing is, my home prices haven't gone up. I'm in my house. I've got a 30-year mortgage. And so the cost of me living in my house hasn't gone up. So that's not impacted me directly.
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to impact anybody who wants to buy a house or anybody wanting to rent an apartment. The other big factor that goes in there is automobile purchases, both new and used. Knock on wood, hopefully my truck will last me a while. So that's not going to impact me. But I am going to be impacted at the pump. I am going to be impacted in the grocery store. I am going to be impacted when I go to buy a new pair of jeans. So although the official rate is just north of 6, based on all those components, my personal inflation rate is not quite as high as that. So, but it does factor into the inflation rate is used to set contracts. It's used for cost of living adjustments and so forth. So inflation is going to be around, I'll say probably at least another 12 months at the current rate. Okay. If we can get more people into the workforce, if we can resolve the supply chain issues, it could go down sooner.
Okay. Thank you for that. Patrick, as you know, we put out monthly market updates to recap the Houston housing market. The focus is mostly single family homes, rentals, etc. But can you update us on the commercial market and the new construction markets?
You want to go from bad to good or good to bad?
We always like the bad news first here.
Okay. One word, office. No, I should say the office market is really struggling. It's been struggling since 2014, 2015. It's sad. I never thought we would get to this spot, but we're getting pretty close to where we were in the 80s when I first started my career and first started struggling the market. There are all different ways to measure a vacancy rate, and there's a direct vacancy rate, there's availability rate, and so forth. But if you look at it just on kind of on net, and if you look at there's JLL has its way to look at it, and CBRE has its way to look at it, NAI has its way to look at it, Colliers has its way to look at it. You look at all those different ones, but roughly almost 30% of office space is vacant in Houston. It's either vacant or it would be vacant if someone could find someone to take the space off their hands, or it's going to come on the market real soon. It's going to be available real soon. Another way to look at that's roughly 70 million square feet of office space. Yes, 70 million. Put that in perspective. The Transco Tower, excuse me, I'm dating myself when I say Transco Tower. The Williams Tower is 1.4 million square feet. So we have the equivalent of 50 Williams Towers of vacant or available office space. Now that's across all sectors. That's Class A, that's Class B, Class C. Some of that stuff will never be leased. Some will be repurposed. But the office market, we're still seeing negative absorption, and we will for a while until we figure out part of what work from home is going to look like. As I talk to people and listen to people out there in the real estate community, new leases are being signed, but when they're signed, they're usually for a little bit less space than they had before. And so we're going to continue to see negative absorption. There is opportunity for new space, but the new space, when it comes in, it has to be packed full of amenities, the highest quality finishes and so forth. And generally, the newest space does not have a problem leasing up. It's some of the older Class A that's having a problem. So that's office. As far as industrial, I was real worried about industrial for a while because we were overbuilding. I thought we were overbuilding, but industrial seems to be doing a lot better. If you see me looking down, it's because I have notes. and it's hard for me to remember all the numbers. I think I've done okay up to this point
You're
remembering my
doing
numbers.
great. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to look at some numbers now. So when I'm looking down, I'm not looking at my cat or checking my watch. I'm looking at my note. Uh, October vacancy rate for industrial was roughly 7.3%. You might add another percent or two to that for which is not vacant, but which is available. That compares to 8.5% this time last year. So the official vacancy rate is trending down. We have about 20 million square feet under construction. That's up a little bit from last year. This time, 15.6 million. Yeah, a lot of numbers I'm throwing out there, but the good thing is we are absorbing more space right now than we are building an
Mm,
industrial, and that's a good sign.
yeah.
Leasing activity is just through the roof. Almost 40 million square feet of industrial space leased this year. Now, that's not absorption; that's transactions.
Hmm.
But the industrial is doing quite well, and a couple of reasons. One is this move towards e-commerce, obviously. Also, distribution centers. A lot of distribution centers coming here. We're still bringing a lot of stuff in and out of the port. All those factors come into play. Uh, you see a distribution center open up in the northwest or the west, and those centers are serving not just Houston, but they're serving Austin and San Antonio and
Hmm.
Dallas. So we benefit from that. So industrial should be doing okay. I'm not worried about industrial. Retail. Once again, here I'm looking down at my notes. I'm not avoiding eye contact, Christina. Uh, or with everyone else. The retail vacancy rate is actually going down a little bit too. Uh, it's 5.8 this time last year at 6.1. Anytime it's around between 5 and 6 is good. Around 5.5 is very good.
Hmm.
Uh, we don't have a whole lot under construction. Less than 4 million square feet under construction. A normal time we might be constructing 4.5 to 7 million square feet. We've absorbed roughly 5 million square feet. So retail, in spite of people saying, talking about the retail apocalypse and brick and mortar being dead, it's not.
Hmm.
Retail is doing fairly well. I mean, like I joked about earlier, even guys like retail therapy, even guys like going out to the gun store, or the hardware store, to the fishing tackle store, or the bookstore. So retail is actually doing fine. The only sector I'm really worried about is office, and it's just worry in the sense is when will we finally bottom out?
Hmm.
Uh, I would, if you are trying to lease office space, my heart goes out to you. If you're an office owner, my heart goes out to you twice
Yeah.
because you definitely have some challenges ahead.
Yeah. Thank you for reviewing that with us. So, do you, and we get this question a lot, as you can imagine, Patrick, do you foresee many foreclosures in the Houston area?
No, not really. You might see an uptick, but you don't see a wave. One of the things that happened in the pandemic is the government just they shoveled money. We had three different stimulus payments that went out, and there's a something called the Peterson Institute has done a survey and asked people what did they do with their stimulus checks. The idea was give them a stimulus check so they'd spend it to keep the economy going. On the first set of stimulus checks, the vast majority, 80% of the people, vast majority, 80% of the money was spent, and 20% was saved or used to pay down debt.
Hmm.
By the time you got to the third stimulus check, 80% of it was saved and 20% was spent. So if you're looking around, a lot of people have their financial situation is a lot better because they were able to save these government stimulus checks or pay down debt. And so if you look at just the amount, I read a Wall Street Journal article. I tried to track down their source, but the Wall Street Journal said there's $1.6 trillion in excess savings out there. I can't figure out how they came up with it, but it's the Wall Street Journal, so I kind of give them a little more credence. So saving are really pretty good. So no, I don't see a wave of foreclosures.
Okay.
And I've got a relative who's in the business of buying foreclosures and fixing them up, and uh, if you're listening, good luck. I mean, it's there's just not a whole lot out there.
Okay. So in Houston, I know you've given us the information on how to find the forecast, and we've also shared those links in the comments. So if you were looking for the links that Patrick mentioned, they are in the comments. But just if you could give us a little highlights here again. In Houston, are there any particular sectors that are just doing better or worse than others overall?
The distribution, transportation, warehousing sector is doing well. and I need to take that out. Not aviation, but ground transportation. We continue to see companies announce that they want to open up a distribution or logistics center here in
Mm.
Houston. Part of that is wanting to be closer to the customer. Part of it is trying to shorten these supply chains. Uh, I've been reading about it. I haven't seen the data yet, but I keep on hearing this discussion about companies realizing that their supply chains were too stretched out in the pandemic and they need to source more from home or carry larger inventory levels. There was an expression out there that maybe some of you heard called just-in-time delivery. And you try to schedule your inventory to arrive just a day or two before you need it or just as you needed it. And that was fine until the supply chain, we had these issues. And now
Hmm.
I'm hearing people talk about just-in-case inventory systems, where you carry just a little bit more than what you'd normally carry. So if you have some sort of disruptions.
Mm.
And so warehouse distribution will do well. Uh, Healthcare always does well. Healthcare does well because our population continues to grow and it continues to age. It's kind of nice in a way. I'm seeing more out of state license plates. I mean, who else is seeing? I'm waving my hand. Who else is seeing out of state license plates out there?
Yeah, let us know in
I'm,
the comments.
I'm seeing a lot more out there than I used to see. So people are moving here, lower cost of living. Yes, housing prices have gone up significantly in Houston, but they're still a bargain compared to Austin or Dallas or other places. So any sector that benefits from population growth. Now we're getting back to being on track. There was a couple years we added fewer than. One year we added only about 73,000 in population, another 85,000, 93. We're getting back to our long-term trend of being an add over 100,000 people a year.
Mm.
And that's not all people moving here. You've got babies being born and you've got people moving here. But that drives demand for housing, for education, for restaurants, for all the consumer sectors. So they're doing well. And energy, God, people don't count energy out. I mean, we're going to still be burning hydrocarbons a lot longer than people believe. I mean, if you look at the data, we're going to get back by December of this year. I'm looking up. No, I don't have anything on my ceiling. I'm just trying to remember. If you look at EIA, Energy Information Administration, and OPEC, they're both forecasting that we're going to get back to pre-COVID levels of crude consumption by December of next year.
Mm.
So how many barrels of crude is that? It's 100 million barrels a day. How do you wean the world off 100 million barrel a day habit? Even if you eliminated everything from transportation, we're still going to be consuming 70 million, 75 million barrels a day. And this transition is going to take a while. So energy is going to be with us for a while. It won't be the driver that it has been in the
Hmm.
past, but it's still a solid, well-paying industry. It's just going to be a little bit smaller and a lot more efficient.
Okay. Holly said that she has clients coming from California, New York, Colorado, and Louisiana. So, yes. And Judith said, yes, she agrees. A lot of out of state license plates.
Colorado is the only one that surprises me. It's interesting. I've looked at the data in the past, and you want to guess where in a normal time where the most people move to, what state people move from to move to Houston? What's the number one state that supplies us with residents?
My guess is California.
Louisiana.
Oh,
And part of it's just because of the oil and gas industry, because oil and gas industry tend to be very mobile. And if you work for an oil and gas firm in Houston, at some point you'll probably work in Louisiana as well.
mm,
And then after that, it's California. But Louisiana is the number one exporter of residents to Houston.
very good. Um, and she said for the Colorado client, it's back and forth with oil and gas. So they go back and forth from here to Colorado. All right. So Patrick, and if you guys are watching and have any questions for Patrick, we're getting close on time here. So please type those in now. But Patrick, I'd love to hear your projections for the final quarter of 2021 and what to expect in 2022.
Okay, 2021, we always see job growth in November, December. And actually, pretty strong job growth. A couple of things. Part of it is people hiring for the holiday season. Part of it is trying to complete plans which were put in place earlier in the year. We are at through October. We're at 104,000 jobs. I wouldn't be surprised if we had another 100, if we had another 20,000 jobs at
Mm.
least. The best year I want to say was 81, 126,000 jobs. and that was on a much smaller economy. But we are real close to maybe surpassing that. So the third quarter should come in even with Omicron. Maybe we won't add 20,000. Maybe we'll only have 15,000. The fourth quarter should come in fairly well. First quarter, January is always weak after the holidays, and it picks up. And February and March tend to be pretty good months for job hiring. So we're looking at 2022 as really being a pretty good year. It's going to be a little bit. It won't be. Anybody who remembers 12 and 13 and 14, forget that. That was not normal. And if you remember 15 and 16, forget that. That was not normal. This is going to be closer to normal with growth. As I said, roughly 75,000 jobs. It could be higher if we can get more people off the sidelines. But 2022 should be a pretty decent year. It won't be a boom year. I liken it to if in 2021 we were at a sprint, 2022 will be more like a brisk walk.
Okay. Very good. Well, mostly good news, except of course for the offices that you mentioned. Is there anything else that you want to share with our viewers today?
Well, the single most important thing, if you want to keep the economy going, the most important thing you can do is get your vaccination. I mean, we can definitely see the impact when we see the vaccination rate growing up, the impact on the economy, and get your booster. I mean, it's I grew up as a kid. I got a smallpox shot. I got a measles shot. I've got so many different vaccinations when I was a kid. This is just one other vaccination. I get my flu shot. I don't know why people are skeptical of it. I mean, people are worried about the after effects. We've been taking them for 9 months now. If they're after effects, I think I'd have the horns growing out of my head or something by now. But people should go out and get their shots if they haven't already. That's the most important thing you can do to help the economy out and prevent your neighbors and your friends from getting sick as well.
Wonderful. Well, Patrick, as always, our members enjoyed this. I'm seeing a lot of hearts and thumbs up coming through right now. So they're loving what you had to say today. And we truly appreciate you taking the time out this morning to share this information with us. Don't forget to visit the Greater Houston Partnerships website. As you said, easiest website to remember in the world, houston.org. We also shared some links in the comments, so be sure to check those out. Next Monday, we will be back with our final Member Focus Monday of the year with HAR's President and CEO, Mr. Bob Hale, and we will be talking about the future of real estate and of HAR. So be sure to tune in next Monday for Member Focus Monday. Patrick, once again, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Christina, I enjoyed doing it. And real quick, shout out Genevieve. I hope to see you at Christmas.
All right. Thank you. We have a great day and have a great week, everyone. Bye-bye.